I'm live.
Real live?
Yeah.
Look at that.
So, I kind of want to start off by giving a little bit of a story here, right?
Sure.
Arcane season 2. I have a long and storied history with League of Legends. Well, first, let me welcome Sable to the stream. I apologize. How rude of me.
That's fine.
Sable, or TPR, to the Big Rancher, thank you for being here once again to indulge in conversation regarding our favorite pieces of media, be they RPGs or movies or television series.
I've been looking forward to it, so thanks for inviting me.
Good. And last time it's I know it's a little weird, right? Kicking off on season 2 for Arcane, but last time I didn't have a YouTube channel, and B, Heath gave us a very generous amount of time to discuss with him, and sort of he included us in that. So that's where all of both of our opinions can be found live on Heath's channel. Or not, I mean, not live anymore. At the moment, they were live. So I feel like I'll start off with the story. So I have a long and straight history with League of Legends. So when I was younger and I was employed at a university as a night shift security, so I worked from 4 to midnight. League of Legends was in its beta, and I don't know how. I can't even remember. I don't know if I got an invite from them or if someone I know got in and they invited me, or if it was just an open beta. I don't recall what stage of the beta it was in. But I remember, because it was night shift, right? Really the only time that we were occupied. Like we had to do our rounds, we had to do our lockups and all that kind of stuff. But between doing rounds in the buildings and between the lockups, there was a lot of time. And so I would find myself in a computer lab, sit down, and just play League of Legends. And so that's where it started. I loved the characters. I had no idea what I was doing. The word, or rather the genre MOBA, massively online battle arena, hadn't even been coined yet, right? It was just a Dota game, right?
Yeah, it was just another Dota. Yeah.
Right. It was another Dota. It was by the people who had created Dota in the first place.
Right.
And no, Druid and Fuzz, I was not always this old, not spring forth from my father's mind fully formed.
Beard and all.
But
dwarf.
But as the game progressed, they added additional champions, and then they started to really kind of develop the lore later. And I don't recall if this happened before or after Greg Street, Ghostcrawler from the WoW developer group, because he was recruited from Blizzard to Riot, and so Greg Street was the one who was responsible for sort of organizing. He was a community manager on top of his regular duties, which had to do with lore and just the general straightening of the game, I think. So they started to develop the lore, and it became incredibly interesting. And so I've been, it's a temperamental relationship I have with them. It's off and on. They'll do something stupid. I'll hate it. I'll stop playing. Then I'll get the bug and I'll start playing again. It's always fun. I am not competitive. I usually always play in ARAM, ARAM, which is all random, all mid, which means that there's only one lane and the game picture champion. And that's the end of the story, because it's a highly, highly competitive game. It has a reputation for being toxic for how competitive it is. Yeah. I don't care. That sort of thing has never bothered me, but there are plenty of people out there who that bothers. I myself am not a toxic individual. I think, generally speaking, I think that when I am the recipient of toxicity, I think it's funny. I'm probably in a very small minority, though. So that's kind of where that came from. Then I think when Arcane came out, the first season, I was I was on the outs with Riot. I was on the outs with League of Legends. I couldn't tell you what they did to make me enjoy it at that particular time, but I was like, nah, Arcane, I don't care about League of Legends right now, and so I'm not going to watch it. It's not really something that I'm motivated to watch or that I moved to watch. So I think a full year passed, right? Was it?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yes, a full year passed.
Actually,
because we talked about this in November of last year, right?
we talked about this, and
When
it's
did
been 3 years since Arcane came out now.
Okay. So if it's
So
been 3 years, then yeah. So it was a full year, maybe even longer,
I think it was
since
closer
I
to
watched
2.
it. And the reason that I watched it was to be able to, well, first of all, you had a big hand in that because you were constantly hammering on Heath, watch Arcane, watch Arcane, watch Arcane. Then Brianna, regular on Heath's show, and Doug, another regular on Heath's show, but he also participates over here with movie reviews sometimes. He and Brianna and you were all kind of you were all ringing that bell. You got to watch Arcane. You got to watch Arcane. And so when Heath finally decided to say, okay, look, I'm going to watch Arcane. We're going to do a discussion on the channel. That's when I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't be in the dark for the conversation, so I'll go and watch it. Absolutely loved it. It's one of those shows, right? Like it is in the same class as a show like Breaking Bad, which does a lot of visual storytelling. And yeah, this is true. This is very true. League of Legends is the greatest game if and only if your goal is to troll the shit out of strangers and bask in the glory of the rage. That's true. That's not why I play it, but hey, if that's your goal, it's the best game for it. So I
think that Arcane is going to be looked back on in the same amount of time. It's the same kind of landmark as Akira is in animation.
Say that again.
Akira? Akira, yeah.
Okay.
Or Ghost in the Shell.
I agree with that. But it's like it's in that class, right? It's in such a elevated class of.
I dare say it's in its own class because nothing else.
As far as animation goes, like yes. I would say yes. I would absolutely grant that it is.
You might say that the Spider-Verse movies are up there too because they're both doing very interesting things with 2D and 3D animation.
I agree with Spider-Verse as well. Spider-Verse is actually great, and maybe that's something that we'll want to discuss on the channel at some point. Those movies are absolutely awesome. Hey everyone, filing in.
Heath is here.
Say thank you, Drudenfud, Zorlex, who is new. I don't believe I've seen you speak up in chat before, so never really played the game myself. Always heard bad things of it, and it just wasn't my type of game. It's not everyone's type of game. It is. It's a very unique type of play experience. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. I get it. They are branching out though, right? So there's a fighting game in the works. There's the card game. Eventually, there's going to be an MMO. So there will be different types of games in this world where you'll be able to experience it. In a more palatable way, if this isn't your style of game. Drudenfud says, I played a little some years ago. The matches took too long. They do. They can take 40 minutes. Here's of the Storm was more my jam. Here's of the Storm I actually really liked as well. And when Arcane came out, played Wild Rift for a little while. I don't like Wild Rift, probably because I am very much used to the standard League of Legends game style. So Wild Rift is just not my thing. I get it if it's your thing. I'm not knocking it. It's not something that I ever got into.
See, Heath is you definitely we are going to spoil the hell out of everything.
Oh yeah.
So if you haven't seen it yet, yes.
Yeah. I did put spoilers. I put a spoiler tag in the wow, this is gonna be another Aliens Romulus situation where I'm calling out spoilers every minute. I don't think I'm going to do that. It's going to affect the flow of the conversation. So I will say, yes, this is spoiler heavy. We're going to spoiler everything. Not spoiler. You know what I mean? I'm excited to talk about it. Can you tell? So Zorlax again. I remember scrolling through Netflix and was just really bored. I knew of Arcane, but never had the want to watch it. On that particular day when I was bored, I happened upon it and watched it. Well, great watch. I was like actively avoiding it because I just didn't care. RPG Gen Exile, hello, and Heath, of course. Hello.
It was probably a year after it came out when I actually finally sat down and watched it, just because I've never played League of Legends, and I had absolutely no interest in it, and it was like, oh yeah, another video game show, whatever.
It's probably going to be crap. Yep. I have those, those off-the-cuff reactions too.
And, justifiably up to this point, Arcane also broke the mold and is a landmark just because it's the first truly superlative video game adaptation, I would say, ever. Partly because they treated it as its own standalone thing. They just
see, that's the thing, right? I don't know if this is necessarily a video game adaptation, because this
it's more
has
like a reboot.
created new
They
canon.
actually,
They
actually went back and said, okay, now Arcane, the show, is the actual lore. We're going to have everything.
Like this is actually. I mean, obviously there were little bits of information that you could get from character descriptions, character interactions, and whatnot, and there was a sort of a design document out there where you could kind of sort of put a few pieces together with regard to Piltover and Zaun and the conflict between the two. But this one, like, it heavily adapted the lore to a point where Riot just said, okay, well, this is canon now, because A, it's excellent, and B, it fits the world so absolutely perfectly.
Yeah. I don't remember what prompted me to finally track it down and watch it. I think a friend must have insisted that I go watch it. And my background is actually one from art and animation. I don't actually recall if I've ever mentioned it on the stream, on your streams, but I have a bachelor's in. It's called it was a bachelor of science, I think is what they classified it as. But I went to an art school and I studied computer animation.
I don't think you've ever mentioned that on a stream.
On your streams, no, I don't think so.
And I think that this really I think that we can really call back to the Northmen conversation here, because
I might have mentioned
of your
it there.
schooling, because of your education, you have a very solid eye for blocking and framing and composition that I think adds remarkably to the conversation. So my history is film editing and writing, and so I kind of bring that thematic analysis that I enjoy so much. I will admit off the top, it's a little bit difficult to do that in an episodic series that hasn't been viewed to completion yet, because there's a lot of missing information, right?
Yes,
like, it's easy to do it in a movie. It's 2.5 hours. I mean, mostly it's 2.5 hours long these days, but sometimes 88 minutes, 90 minutes to 12 or 120 to, whatever tail it has, 15, 20, 30 extra minutes. But I think that it's more difficult to nail a theme down in the absence of a resolution. So I'm going to do my best for sure.
But we do have the advantage that it's season 2, so it has to. It is incumbent upon the writers to carry through the previous season's thematic material as well.
Yes, and I definitely want to hit on this. Switters says, I haven't seen it. If you had, what would you rate it using only bad, okay, good, or great? I'd say great. Season 1.
Season 1 is better than great. Season 1 is it's hard to. I won't say perfect, because there are a couple minor hiccups, but I cannot think of a television show, especially animated, that I would rate higher than Arcane, of anything I have ever seen in my entire life. And that's not an exaggeration.
I haven't actually sit down to think about it like that, but just off the cuff like this being asked, I would say season 1 is great, just provided the criteria. I would probably rank it above great like yourself, but provided the criteria, season 1 is great. Season 2, I'd actually probably back off a little bit and say at this point, with only 3 episodes available, it's good, but with 6 episodes incoming, it does have room to sort of grow into greatness. But
if you're comparing, it's not a fair comparison, because if you're comparing Act 1 of Season 1 and the way that hit,
yes.
By the end of episode 3, I was weeping, and I have no shame in saying so.
No, that's totally fine. I didn't.
This one's not as focused.
I didn't weep at the end of the first 3 episodes. And so, okay, the way the show's broken down is it's 3 acts, each act in 3 episodes, and then of course each episode breaks down into its own act structure. But it's 3 acts in 3 episodes, which is why they released them in 3 episode chunks. And so while
they basically did a trilogy of movies, essentially.
So while the first season was okay, I didn't weep, but there was a very strong emotional punch, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that made me cry. I did experience the emotion. It was effective. It did hook me. I did want to see more,
Yeah.
and it promised. I like a more bleak story, right? So it promised a bleak de-evolution of character relationships that I was very keenly interested in observing,
Yeah,
right?
it's a tragedy. By the time
Yes, it's very much a
by the time
tragedy.
you're halfway through episode 3 of season 1, act 1, you see all the dominoes already on their way down, face up, and there's nothing to
Yes.
stop it. It's
Yep,
an
and
obvious
yes,
tragedy
and
by
it's
that point.
just right. It's the tragedy is being forced to watch it happen without
Yeah,
any recourse. It's just
yeah.
it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen because you know where. Hey, every once in a while, you get a bit of coal in your eye from mining, and you just you got to shed that tear to wash your
Dwarves do cry, but it's just sand.
It's just right. Sand and gravel. So
And then it's one of the few shows that by the end of the 9th episode, I was crying again. It made me cry for the villain, which is quite an achievement.
because
Cool.
it's very
Such an
all the
amazing
characters
show.
are very complex,
Yes.
right? So it's not a matter of bad guy bad, good guy good, right?
Well,
There's always
I mean,
it's not exclusively a matter of bad guy bad, good guy good, right? Like
right.
there are character traits that each character possesses that allows you to, at least in moments, understand and
right.
identify
You can see
with
where they're coming from.
yes,
Doesn't
which
mean
is
that they're
very
not
important,
a bad guy.
I think, to the series.
Silco's unequivocally a bad guy. Like he does awful things just for expediency's sake. But there's a reason why he does the awful things that he believes himself to be justified, and you can see that. It doesn't make him a good person, doesn't make him any better. Or
Yes.
the things that he does any better. It's just, okay, yeah, I get your justification. And it makes him very just like a lot of the best villains out there, it makes him very interesting to watch because he's so charismatic and he's so convinced that he's in the right.
Yes. He is an underworld crime boss, slime ball, but he has elements of humanity. He needs other people to perform delicate, intimate actions in order for him to survive, right? So that, and he was just very well realized, very well realized film. I don't actually mind that there isn't going to be a season 3. Micah, I'm not the sort of person. Like, I'm not the sort of person who needs additional content. Like, I am perfectly okay with having Tolkien's books and J.R.R. Tolkien's books, and then the follow-up that Christopher Tolkien was able to add in the Silmarillion and whatnot, and the collections of the notes. Like, I don't need the movies. I'm glad I have them for sure. Even the Hobbit movies. I actually like the Hobbit movies. That's a story unto itself. But I don't need anything more, right? Like, if I really need Lord of the Rings, I can just go and read Lord of the Rings. It's all there. It's self-contained. So, and in fact, at the end of the 3rd episode, I remember saying, and I think I went to Candace and I said this, I would have been okay had they just left it at season 1, because season 1 was so incredibly well realized and it ended so well. I didn't need a second season. I hopefully will end up being glad that I'm getting it, right? But I don't need a 3rd season for sure. I don't think I need that, and I think that we'll get into why, but
yeah, I'm really interested. Because once I get started, I'm just going to go off.
And that's cool.
I'm really interested, though, for your perspective, because I don't know I dropped my first and second impressions to you in a couple of lines.
You did.
But I am interested in your first impressions, especially with somebody who's way more familiar with the development of the game and the lore and the world.
Okay.
Which I am not, right?
As far as the game and the lore is concerned, they're nailing everything. There are, there's nuance that they're creating. There is, they're creating a lot of what's going into the lore, so I'm sort of experiencing it as I'm watching it. And so it's not it's not. I'm not concerned with matching it up to what I previously know from the lore because I know that this is canon.
Right.
So I'll put that aside.
Okay.
Everything that I know, everything that I thought I knew, I'm okay with this rewriting that if it happens to. Haven't really experienced anything where it rewrites it yet. Like the relationships are all still there. The motivations are all still there. But I mean, they're a little dialed up. They're a little dialed up in the series. But I'm not really concerned with the lore of the game because I know that this is canon. On top of that as far as so one of the first things I did was I looked up if the showrunners were the same as season 1, and this is after the first episode. So I watched the first episode and I went, something feels different. Yes, something feels different. Let me go see. So the showrunners are the same, and that's unusual. So typically, if you change a showrunner, there is a noticeable change in tone or structure or thematic presentation. We got all of that, but the showrunners are the same, which I found strange. However, the writers are
yes.
They've changed writers.
Amanda Overton, who wrote the first episode, was the one who they brought in as a story consultant when the original drafts. I think they went through 2 whole drafts of the first season of Arcane, and this is one of the reasons it took 7 years. And the first one was they self-admitted it was utter garbage, and they brought it to the higher ups at Riot or whatever, and they were like, I'm not sure that you want to go forward with this. And they almost gave up. They almost canceled the whole thing. Amanda Overton was the story consultant they brought in, who they credit largely with being able to rope everything together and make it all into a cohesive whole, and gave them really good, solid insights on, no, this is what you need to change, and this is why. And then when they rewrote it, and again, the Christopher Linke and what's this other
Alex
Lee, they I think they wrote the first and the last episodes of season 1, if I remember right. I know they wrote the last episode. But yeah, Amanda Overton, I don't think actually had a writing credit for any single episode in season 1. I'd have to go back and look to make sure. I could be wrong. But she wrote the first episode all on her own. She's the sole writing credit for episode 1 in season 2. And I don't think she should get that anymore.
I think that here's the thing. I think that so as a story consultant, I think clearly she excelled in delivering a quality product to season 1.
Right.
So I don't want to be too harsh or too hard, but there are bits of dialogue in season 1 which is literally, I am character and this is how I feel. I am character and this is how I feel. You don't know how I feel? Yes, I do. Yeah. It's really
in episode really 1, yes,
elementary.
Yeah, it just okay, yeah. May I go off?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do.
You're entirely correct. And the worst offender is the scene where Jace comes. Okay, by the way, full on spoilers from this point on.
Yeah. From this point forward, we're full on spoilers.
So if you haven't seen season 2 yet, please duck out, go watch it.
Or even season 1, because I'm sure we'll touch on season 1 as well. So if you haven't seen it, please go watch. If you don't care about spoilers, then by all means stay. But we are absolutely going into spoiler territory beyond this point.
Yeah, if you haven't even seen season 1 yet, what are you doing here? Please go watch that. But yes, the worst offender of that kind of dialogue that you just pointed out was the conversation that Jace and Caitlin had, right? Mm-hmm. When he comes up to her under the tree, and it was painfully awkward. I was just like, oh, it was painfully awkward. Mm-hmm. Nobody talks like that. Okay, it makes sense that she would just do verbal diarrhea on Jace because he's been her friend for most of her life, right?
Yeah, he's been there the whole time.
It totally makes sense that she would just expose herself to him. But then then they write her as she gets all poetic about when you're bearing your heart, when you're tearing open your chest and showing your heart to somebody, you typically are making short declarative statements and struggling for the words a lot of the time. And what you say is never really complete to what you're actually feeling. And when you're writing dialogue, there's a further layer in that, in which you don't want the characters, in almost no situation do you want the characters to outright state what they actually mean.
Yeah.
You want to write it obliquely.
Yes.
You want subtext.
You want subtext.
And then and she does do that a little bit later after the attack on the memorial, which was actually a really good example, which I'll touch in a minute. But in this text, she's like, I see my mother's face lying there after they found her, which is something that somebody could absolutely say in that. And then every fiber of my being sinks like a stone into dark water or something like that. It's like, wait, what? Nobody talks like that.
Yeah, no one talks like that. That
so
particular
awkward.
line struck me in that same way.
And then and then I hear Jinx's laugh, and I want to tear the laugh from her throat. And it's like, yeah, okay, you're trying way too hard here.
I think that where the first season really relied on the nuance of the facial animations to communicate what they were actually feeling against what they were saying. And unfortunately, what we're getting in season 2, at least in the first episode, and then, so definitely in the first episode, I think it lightened. I think episode 2 was the best of the 3.
By far.
So episode 2 was the best of the 3, and then it was definitely I think Ambessa is well written. I think Victor is well written.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime they had a conversation or an interaction with anyone, it was generally very, very good. Like Ambessa is, I think, she's definitely elevated, right? So with regard to the nuance and the character emotion. So Ambessa is very do one thing that seems very weird to an audience, or not even weird, just villainous. So Ambessa does this thing that seems villainous to the audience, but she has motivation for doing so, that being protecting her family. There's one line I think it's episode 3, where she says, Mel's better off as our enemy. The further away from us, the better. She'll be safer there. So like she's doing all of this. She's doing all of this warmongering, all of this posturing to really kind of keep her family safe, at least in part. And I think that is because I would not have landed there had she not said that. I think that is a very strong indicator of how excellently her dialogue is written against her expression and her action. So Ambessa is actually just awesome.
Yeah, she's outstanding. She's definitely lining up to take over the role of primary antagonist from Silco.
Yes,
and a worthy successor to that role.
Yes,
they're writing her really well, but there are fundamental. For as high glowing and constant praise as I will heap upon season 1, season 2, from the little bit I've seen of reactions and reviews coming out so far, just in the last couple of days, is also getting almost universally glowing reviews. I'm a little different than that. I think
I didn't read much of the reviews or other people's takes, but I think that what's happening is I would have expected that, and B, my take on that would be that people are still anticipating what's to come, and so they're still sort of like, here we are, we're getting more of what we want. I'm very interested. I'm very excited. So I'm going to give it good reviews because I have that hope. And it's not that I don't have that hope. I very much do. It's just that with this narrow window of the first 3 episodes, that's what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah.
And so it's just.
I'm intrigued, especially by the end of episode 3 here in season 2.
Okay.
I also do want to see what happens next. And it's just a pleasure to watch because the animation is still so freaking good. And the art style is gorgeous. Like,
there are some issues with the animation that I've had, though, right? There is this thing that they've decided to start doing, and it seems like it's every episode. It might only be 2 out of 3, but there's a new thing that they're doing with lyrical songs. They're
Yeah.
just kind of dumping them in the episodes, which I do not like. I do not like that. I think that what they're trying to do is utilize song and music and score to elicit a stronger emotional response, but that's very close to just telling me how I should feel.
Well,
Don't tell me how I
they
should
did that in season 1,
but they didn't do it
most of
this
the time,
often,
but they
right?
didn't do it that often. Most episodes only got one of those.
Yes.
Episode 7 did get two. The cold open intro was the hip hop intro to the Firelights, and then the bridge fight, which was one of the most incredible pieces of animation I have ever seen. It's a mind-blowing sequence.
If it's your thing, Zorlex, if you like how it's implemented, that's awesome. I'm not saying
They did
it's
it far better
bad.
than
I'm
the
not
first
saying it's
season, really.
wrong. I'm just saying it didn't land with me. So I'm being very careful to own that as a preference for this statement. There are some things that I will say are bad. Like, I am character, I feel this way. That's bad.
That's bad.
But for this particular element, this is on me. This is a preference that I have, and so I'm going to be careful to make sure that I mention that.
It's a preference that I share too, and I think that when they did it in season 1, I would actually have to disagree with Sorlax there, because I think when they did it in season 1, they made sure that, like, the best examples would be at the end of episode 6 when Jinx lights up the flare, and that's when that for hire goes off.
Oh, sure.
Oh man, that's so good. And
yeah,
then
and
same at the end of episode 9 at the finale of the season.
And I agree with those two. And here's the reason why I think I like those implementations better. So those implementations, it's a release, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
The audience is feeling a certain way based on what we've seen, what these characters are experiencing. We've built up the emotion along with them, and that song allows us to just release that tension and that emotion.
Yeah.
In the way that they're implemented, at least in the first 3 episodes here, it feels like they're telling me how I should feel instead of predicting how I should feel and allowing me that release.
They're using it more as a means of exposition, and the lyrics themselves are written more as if it was some kind of dialogue in the show, generally speaking.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I think they're using it. It's less about an emotional payoff, and it's more about setting a tone. And I don't think it works as well that way. I mean, yeah, I can see why they're doing it, because Riot has long been, and everything they did with Fortiche up until Arcane was music videos, right?
Yes,
so
yes, exactly. And
they've always had a big focus on
here.
that.
Riot for me is more of a music producer than a video game developer anyway, and so it worked for me in season 1. So I've watched everything that Riot has ever produced as far as music videos are concerned. Love every single last one of them. They really, really hire the right people. But just for some, and I still have to go back and rewatch. So this is literally off of, it was a first watching, and then it was kind of a sort of a jumbled up mishmash so that I could take notes, right? So I need to go back and legitimately give a watch to these episodes again, where I'm just enjoying it for what it is, and I'm not hyper focusing on things to be able to just, pick out discussion topics or taking notes so that I can be critical of something over here. So I haven't watched it yet. And there is the possibility that I warm up to the music, but just for some reason, this particular set of episodes did not land for me. And then another thing that didn't land for me was there are these vignettes of different animation. And I can't remember if they did this in the first season, but like episode 1 is the one that stands out starkly for me. And then there's another one in episode 3, like, the black and white with the full. So it's black and white in 2D, and then it's Caitlyn in full color in 3D. And they're focusing on her grief, and they're focusing on the bleakness of the death of her mother and the starkness she feels of her future moving forward. And so I get all that, but it's very jarring. I had a very jarring experience while watching that, to a point where I kind of couldn't wait for it to end. I don't think the animation was bad. That's not my criticism. My criticism is that they slotted it in very strangely. And then there's another full color 2D animation of the squad that Caitlyn's assembled to sort of go in and infiltrate.
Well, they're
so
using the very similar style to what they did in episode 7, The Boy Savior, in season 1 for that, actually.
See, I don't remember that, and that could be why it's not landing. And I just had a very brief conversation with Heath earlier that I really should have gone back and watched season 1. I just couldn't make the time this week to do it. So I should have done it in preparation. That's on me. That's my fault. And so I think that in next week, when we discuss the next 3 episodes, I think that I'll probably be doing a little bit of criticism mitigation from this episode, because I think that I'm misremembering things, or I'm missing things from the first season that I really shouldn't be missing. I should have had an additional watch through. So while I do sound harsh, I think that that will soften, I think, by next week.
I mean, I've watched Act 1 of season 2 4 times now, in order to drop the first and second impressions that I did for you, and then I did.
Okay. Mike, different art styles, but not as much as in this season, and not as massively. So, so if he's saying this now, if Mike is saying this now, what this means is that they're doing it more in the first 3 episodes than they did in all 9 of last season, which is probably what I'm picking up on.
Yeah, they did. The art shifts were typically only around Echo.
Yes,
they really did, and then a little bit around Jinx with some of the stuff that she. But a lot of the changes in animation style were more directorial and editing, and they were actual art style. Typically, I think. Let me think. Yeah, I think it's only Echo's stuff in episode 7 that they really shifted art styles. But I think they had. Maybe that's one of the reasons that season or episode 2 is the strongest. I don't think they had. I'll have to go and watch it again. That's another thing too. Is the okay, boy, I've got a lot here.
Well, what do you want to drill down on? Do you want to start at episode 1? Because I have notes.
Yeah, let's start on episode 1.
I kind of labeled the episodes, right? So I want to start with theme. I always start with theme, and again, this may change as the series forces it to evolve over time as more information is revealed. But I think that the theme currently, right, is death and grief. It's also family. We're carrying family forward from the last season. But in these 3 episodes, it is very, very focused on death and how that grieving process kind of manifests in each individual. And it's very different for each person, because the deaths are very different for each person, right?
I'd say the more unifying theme of it all would be retribution.
I think retribution is also a theme. Yes,
I mean because that is that would fit with Ambessa.
It would.
Rose,
so I think you're nailing it. So I think
that would fit with Jinx. It would fit with all of them.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick with death. I'm going to stick with grief.
Those
also
are
family.
Yes, for sure.
But I think that retribution is in there for sure, and I think that it is a primary theme in the first 3 episodes. So. Yeah. Episode 1, what I have written next to episode 1 is the survivors. So episode 1 is all about how the survivors react to the death of a close one. There's Caitlyn, right? So there's Caitlyn, and they do a little bit of the color stuff, but really not massively. They mostly focus on the color purple with Caitlyn. So. Yeah. Her mother is buried with purple flowers, which is, of course, symbolic of a part of Caitlyn being buried with her mother. There is a marked change in Caitlyn's motivations and demeanor after her mother dies. So that all is a part of that same read, right?
Which was actually, just to touch on that real quick, one of the well-written conversations in episode, or at least part of the conversation in episode 1 was after the attack on the memorial, when Caitlyn's like she's left this big hole and I'm just supposed to fill it like she was never there, which is a great way of saying that of saying that she's overwhelmed by the responsibility of being a Kiraman, and that part of what she's going through and dealing with is the conflict with, if she steps forward and just picks up as she's supposed to, she feels like she's erasing her mother in some way, or the memory of her mother. And then Vi's response is, you won't. The hole gets smaller, but it never goes away. And she's talking about something completely different.
Yes, completely different.
So they're having a conversation directly on one level, and both of them are saying things that are different than what they're speaking.
Yes. And so what I have here, I took some like brief notes on the individual deaths and how each character reacts to those deaths. So for we're on Caitlin, so I'll just do Caitlin and her mother. So her mother is definitively dead and buried. Caitlin gets closure by adding the flower petals on top of her mother's corpse. That's a standard practice in very many cultures where you sort of help bury them to receive closure. It's a finality, right? It's an act of finality. So her mother is definitively dead, and that death is full of regret. And that I have here leads to vengeance, but I like your word retribution better. So the regret leads to the retribution based on the Caitlin reaction to her mother's death, right? So her mother is definitively dead completely. For Jinx and Vi, they're both alive, but they're dead to each other because something has changed so drastically in each of them that does not allow them to treat each other like sisters anymore. So Vi has essentially, in the eyes of Jinx, replaced Jinx with Caitlin. So Vi is her rock. Vi is the one that she goes to for emotional comfort. And so that, from Jinx's perspective, has now replaced her. So Vi is dead to her. She doesn't get those things from Vi anymore, which is what she primarily got from Vi. And so now Vi's dead, but also Jinx is dead. And it's almost definitively said so in the dialogue. That's not my sister. That's only Jinx is left. So Jinx is also dead to Vi. So they're both very much alive, but they're dead to each other. Then there's Jace and Victor. Victor is alive, but should have died. And this engenders resentment. So there's a lot of different deaths that have taken place here. And there's a lot of different reactions to those deaths. And I will get into Victor later because the focus on him in the second episode is really what I wanted out of this season. And I think I've even told you that. Like, I want to see how they develop Victor's story. I think that Jinx and Vi is interesting. I think Caitlin is interesting. But I was mostly interested in Victor because he's a very unique... He has a very unique story in what lore I do know from the game, and I want to see how that evolves canonically in this show. So that's why I
see a couple of hiccups, but it's really good.
Yeah, it's really very good. So I mean, obvious, like, look, there's an obvious parallel there. We'll draw that when we get to the second episode, but what else do I have here on episode 1? So I have the survivors, I have the death relationships. That might be all of the notes that I took down, but there's way more to talk about with episode 1, right?
Oh, yeah, there is. In fact, it would have been a stronger season if they had gotten rid of episode 1 entirely, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. In fact, and you should mention this, right? As I was watching it, the moment the show started, I was immediately confused that there was no time jump. There should have been a time jump.
Yeah.
I was immediately confused. Like, why are we resuming literally the second after the first season ended?
Yeah.
It just felt strange because we could have gotten, like, we understood the relationships among the characters. We understood, like, the fear that Jace had for Mel potentially dying. We understood the impact that Caitlin's mother's deaths would have on Caitlin. We understood the responsibility that Vi would feel for allowing Jinx, quote unquote, allowing Jinx to go off the rails and cause.
This is exactly why the end of season 1 was not actually a cliffhanger.
Right.
Like, it set everything up so well that we could extrapolate every consequence of that ending.
Exactly. So I don't need to see any of that because I've already been given that in the finale of the first season. So I think that you could absolutely chop the first episode off and we would be completely fine because we knew where all of this was ending up because of the effective Right. Oh, there's one more note that I have, right? For episode 1 is that we don't see Jinx anywhere because she is everywhere. Jinx is the one responsible for causing all of this fallout, all of the different deaths she is responsible for. And so we don't see her anywhere, but she is everywhere in the first episode. That's the only other note that I have for episode 1. But please, I've talked for a million years now. Go ahead and what do you have?
Well, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do when we got on here is fix Act 1.
Okay, sure, go for it.
So easiest way to do that is just cut off episode 1 entirely and start at episode 2, and take everything that happens in episodes 2 and 3 and expand it out and give it a little more time to sink its teeth in and breathe, because some of it did feel pretty rushed. But there's a few different things going on here that I think are undercutting the show, that were conventions that they established in the first season that made the show so strong. The first one is structurally. The way that they started every episode of the first season with a flashback or some kind of a vignette. Episode 4 wasn't a flashback, but the character of episode 4. So what they did is they started each episode with a vignette or flashback involving the character who was going to be the main focus or the main drive of the action in that episode. So episode 1 was young Vi and Powder on the bridge being rescued by Vander. So then the rest of that episode is, and that was a flashback because we then time jump to now, and the episode is getting us involved with them and their family and their lives and the things that happen that kick all of the events off. Excuse me. Episode 2 was Jace, because we then flash back to his view of the events that caused the Hextech accident and everything, and then it's the entire focus. Not to say that all of the rest of the characters don't also appear, but his storyline was the driving focus of that episode. And then same with episode 3, you had Silco's flashback to the attempt that Vander had to drown him in the river, and him fighting free, and how that formed him into what he's doing, the kind of character who's doing what he's doing now. And then, of course, he is the driving force of everything that happens in that episode, and so on and so forth. It's a fantastic little convention that you set up. Episode 4 is a little different, but like I said, the character, quote unquote, that you focus on is the city of Piltover itself and its society, right? In episode 4. So we are introduced to the reason, via Heimerdinger's explanation, what Piltover means, right? And so on and so forth. And it's a fantastic structure, because it allows you to build up characters in a certain way, like they did with Mel, all the way through the entire season up until episode 8, the next to last episode. And then we get a flashback for her that recontextualizes everything she's done up to that point, and it makes sense, right? So if you want to not tell your audience everything about everything that's going on all at once, it's a great way to be able to spring surprises on them that do not feel like they come out of nowhere. They're not doing any of that in this season. In season 2, there are none of the vignettes or flashbacks starting each episode. The cold opens are just, okay, here's what happened next, and then they keep going. And I actually think that was one of the significant strengths of the storytelling style of Arcane, and it's a significant weakness now that we've seen it done so well that it's missing here. It makes the show feel very, very different. So when I talk about how to fix Act 1 of Season 2, I'm gonna outline how you could use that same storytelling convention to make these episodes a lot stronger.
Sure.
The other thing that really stands out to me is that you could not level an accusation to anybody in Season 1, is that there are characters that have no story, no name, no motivation introduced, and we're supposed to treat them as if they're main characters and we need to care about them. in Act 1 of Season 2. Like Fish Guy. Like why do they have Abe Sapien in their little squad?
Yeah, it was a little weird.
He does not have he's never given a name. He literally does not say a single word of dialogue in the entire act, and he doesn't do anything of any note except for saving Officer Maddie. Whatever.
I'm even unfamiliar with his species in the lore of the game. Like
I just call him Abe Sapien.
There are several times where that's happened. Like there's the fox lady who's the informing Mel. Have no idea what her species is. I don't believe I've ever seen it in the League of Legends lore or as a character. I mean, possibly, but not quite. And then there's the fish guy who is like I mean
he's a cool design. He's kind of like Abe Sapien, right?
Yeah, he very much is. He very much is. But like,
I don't have any issues with design or anything. But why is he there as a character? No. And the same
it was weird.
Shield guy.
Like, I wonder what that is, or wonder who that is.
Shield guy is obviously being set up as some kind of Evander stand-in, maybe. I shouldn't say obviously. I think maybe that's what they're doing with him. But we don't get his name. He's just a drunk Shield guy.
Well, so there's two characters in the season. It's Little Kid with the hat.
Little Kid is another one.
And I was gonna the Shield guy. Well, hold on, because there's the guy with the shield who is reminiscent of a League of Legends character called Brown. And then there is the kid with the hat who is reminiscent of a League of Legends character, Teemo. So like but Teemo he's a Yordle, so he's furry like Heimerdinger. So like they're doing these different character nods, which is great, and it's an Easter egg for people who have played the game, which I love. But at the same time, it's also a little confusing because like, well, that's not Teemo.
He's dressed like just brought Braum in. He'd be a strong character.
Just put Braum in, which would be weird, but at the same time, I'm sure you could figure out a way to fit him in.
Yeah, and the little kid who has an obsession with Jinx it makes sense with Jinx, or it makes sense that she would be obsessed with Jinx, because she saved her life.
Yeah, saved her life.
But here's the thing: is like, okay, why was she being chased by the Kim Baron's men in the first place? So she's important in some way, but we're never shown why or how.
Mm-hmm.
She also has no name and says nothing in the entire episode. And this is one of the things that really stands out to me, that all the characters in season 1, it was like setting up a billiards table, and all of them were individual balls, and they all would shoot off in one direction, and you had no idea what would happen when they smacked into the other balls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything felt surprising. I got to the end of every episode in season 1, and I was like, I have no idea what's going to happen next.
I agree with you.
But,
I had that same
reaction. When it happened,
actual hell is happening. Yeah.
But then when it happened, it's like, of course it would happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
So in this season, the little kid is an especially egregious example of that. You can see what they're doing before they do it. The reason that the kid was introduced is to be the powder to Jinx, as
she's the big pester now.
Powder.
Exactly.
So that when you get to the end of episode 3, you can put her on top of Jinx and make it so that Vi has to struggle with, realizes that she has not actually reconciled to the fact that her sister needs to die, or like she said she did, and like that character exists only as an instigator, that character exists for one specific story purpose. There's a lot of things in Act 1 of Season 2 that feel like they're happening just because they're supposed to happen that way, not because it's a natural outgrowth of the characters caroming off of each other.
So, Truth and Fuzz, you are correct. So, Singed did not get introduced in Season 1 with
No, he was named. He was the doctor.
But he wasn't named Singed. Here's the difference between Singed and the kid, right? Singed was dressed like Singed, and everyone who played the game knew who he was. And this is coming exclusively from the perspective of someone who's played the game. So this is why I'm experiencing confusion, right? I knew who Singed was when I saw him. I do not know who this kid is, and this kid is dressed like a completely different character within the lore, right? So this kid is 100% dressed like Teemo, who is a Yordle, who, like I said, is fuzzy. This kid is not Teemo. And so it's become a sort of a bit of confusion. Now, I'm happy for the kid to be there. I'm happy for the interactions that they've had together, that Jinx has had with I'm just going to call her Teemo. but that's where the confusion's coming from. There's a visual representation that is unexpected. However, I think the interaction with Jinx is very subtle. I think it's critically subtle. I think it's very good writing. I think that now that Jinx is the older sister, she's the reluctant older sister. It does a lot to build character. So I'm not.
It does.
I don't dislike the character. I don't.
No, the role of the character is.
I just there should be more to it than this, right?
Yeah, that character role is a good role, but the character who they have filling it is not a character.
It's an accessory.
She's an accessory. We know nothing about her, and there's no reason we should care about her.
Absolutely.
Other than that she's tied to Jinx. Like, okay.
And that's why I care about her, because I care about how Jinx's characterization is going to change based on her interaction with this kid. I do not care about the kid.
Exactly. And see, if you're going to set up, which I think that's what they're trying to do, but if you're going to set up the Vi and Powder relationship with Jinx and nameless little girl, then you need to spend as much time characterizing
subtitles. That's a possibility. I did watch with subtitles, but I was kind of half watching this, half reading the subtitles. So that is a possibility.
I mean, I don't. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't like that's retroactive, I guess you could say.
Well, and also
maybe we'll learn her name later,
really
but I don't know it now.
Thrust of the statement, right? The thrust of the statement isn't that the kid doesn't have a name. The main thrust of the statement is that the kid is an accessory to Jinx and not a fully realized character.
Exactly. That's a better way of putting it. So these are what I think are the weaknesses that they should have continued certain conventions that they established from season 1, because it's part of the identity of the show, and it's part of the identity. It's part of the identity of the storytelling style of the show, and it's very effective for doing what they're doing. What they've done instead is they've shifted so that we get a after credits quote unquote teaser. It's before the credits, but it's after the end of all the main actions of each episode. We get a short clip of Singed finding these wolves in a cave and then using those to create a big old werewolf monster that we know is going to be Warwick.
Yes.
Which
I'm excited for, but
that all should be. Let's make that episode 4, right?
Yeah, it's
that should all be its own episode.
B plot for how important this is. It's strange to make it a B plot.
Yeah. So, all that being said, so those are the main big weaknesses. A couple of other weaknesses. For as strong as episode 2 is, there are a couple of real hiccups. One is the conversation that you
said episode 2. We're getting into episode 2.
Well, I'm saying how would I fix the entire act? So it's all.
Oh, gotcha. Keep going. Go ahead.
How would I change how it's put together? I was just talking about all this stuff to set up all the reasons why I don't think season 2 is working as well yet. And it may, by the end of things, work very well. We still have 2/3 of the season to go, but as it is right now, just the first act has critical flaws that are undercutting it. A couple of the real standout examples in episode 2 are, number 1, the conversation that Jace and Victor have when Victor comes out of the cocoon.
Absolutely agree with that.
It was so. They started off. It started off going pretty well, where they were kind of talking at cross purposes with each other, and then they both just started. They both just started saying lines of dialogue that had no relation to each other. It was very strange.
Yeah, it's like when Victor, I forget what the question that Victor asked him was, but Jace's response was, "No, don't you see? It saved your life," and yada yada, and it's like,
but I was supposed to die.
He wasn't really answering the question. He was just kind of blathering.
Yeah, and it needed to be longer, and it needed to be tightened up with a couple more writing passes for sure.
I agree.
The other real weird hiccup is the introduction of Smeech and his men going down to in the elevator ride to attack the. I guess she's the one who runs all the prostitution and everything. So
we don't know that information. She's just another one of the chem bosses.
Yeah, but I mean Well, the guy with the long face and the glasses says, "Why would I be interested in taking you over your boulevard of filth?"
Yeah, I mean,
So
look, there's implications, but we don't know for
there's a
sure.
but I mean this
She's the only
is
female
what
chem boss.
this is what I'm picking up about what part of the underworld she runs. But regardless of what it is, they're going down to fight all of her dominatrix type of people,
Mm-hmm.
and they get down there, and the gray is being pumped into that area,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all down and coughing and out of it, poison, and so he sends the bookkeeper guy in there, and there's a shadow in there that turns around and has the glowing white eyes, like we'll see later on with the masks. But it's
Mm-hmm.
three of them there, and he screams, and then it cuts to black, and then it goes right to a meeting of the Kim Barons, and not that scene. It's unclear if he saw the Gray itself doing that, or if he ran into the enforcers. We don't know what happened to him because he's just fine later on when they're attacking Jinx in the alleyway.
Mm-hmm.
And Smeech himself never mentions it. It's never touched on again or explained in any way. So why was that scene even in there?
Yeah, I don't know. It was very strange. It definitely could have been cut, and or it could have been used better in the following scene. He should have
Right. He should have brought it up in the
someone's using the gray.
Yeah.
We
don't know who is using it.
It's weird that I don't know the name of the woman Chem Baron. So
no, I don't
I'm just going to call her, I guess, the woman Chem Baron. So it's weird that she doesn't know what happened,
right,
or at least doesn't mention that she knows what happened, because it was an attack on her turf, clearly, because it was her group that was all knocked out. And then Smeech doesn't say a damn thing about it either. And it's like, well, it's really strange that if someone was using the gray as a weapon, as was so clearly evident, why didn't they bring this up? It's a huge deal, right?
It's a huge deal. I mean, just last season in, I think it was episode 7, Silco walked in with canisters of this stuff and gassed them all, saying, "Hey, you don't recognize it? You remember the air so thick it clogged our throat?" That's what he was doing. Yeah. It's just not quite so sooty.
I agree with you, Drew Futz. I also picked up that it is probably Caitlyn's team. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't some sort of swerve that they're planning in future episodes. Maybe it was Warwick or whatever. I don't know. But I agree with you. I think that the idea that they're trying to communicate is that the audience should think that this is Caitlyn's team.
Yeah, but it's never
said, and it's never
clarified, and it's never addressed subsequently, which is the problem. So episode 3, it's hard for me actually to pick out any one specific thing that was weak about it, other than it's way too rushed. Everything happens because it feels like it was supposed to happen, not because it makes sense for it to happen, if that makes any sense at all. Like the motivations behind the events that happen, other than the ending fight with Savika and Jinx and Vi and Caitlyn, was fantastic.
Yeah, it was great.
Wonderfully animated, very tense. All the stakes, we know these characters. There's none of the... I find it very interesting that they ditched all of the other new characters beforehand, specifically saying we need to get rid of these people. I think that at a subconscious level, the writers realized that they would only weaken the conflict, because this is now the confrontation between all the characters who carried over from the first season, who we already know intimately and who we understand the stakes and we understand the drives. And that's why that fight lands. It's a very good scene. Up until the point where little Timo kid comes up and it's like, okay, well, this is the reason you exist, and the only reason you exist. And it's like, you should have said it better. So all that being said, here's how we fix Act 1, in my opinion. Number 1, first off, we go back to having a cold open for every episode, and it's going to indicate the characters that we're going to focus on as the driving force of the storyline for that episode. Episode 1, instead of opening at the council chamber with Jace picking Mel up, which makes us think that, okay, I thought at first this was the cold open. Okay, we're going to have a story of Jace and Mel being the driving force. Wasn't. Turned out to be mostly Caitlyn, but and partially Mbessa. But here's what you do for the new version. You start off with the cold open, and it is right after the missile goes through the council window. But it's back down at the cannery with Caitlin and Vi and Jinx. And we see Caitlin losing it. We see Vi just the way she was at the dinner party, totally lost in how to handle it. We see the now no longer manic, just like stone dead kind of fully Jinx version of Powder now, right? And we have an interaction of Caitlin trying to stop her, but she's injured, and maybe Vi tries to stop her. Regardless of what kind of interaction there is, it could just even be a cold open of like 30 seconds or less where we just focus on the characters kind of like looking at each other, right? And then bam, we're into the titles. And then episode 1 now starts with a time jump, not a long time jump, not as long as it did it for the episode 1 of season 1, but we are introduced, we leave everything that happened in the council chamber and Piltover as a whole, we leave that in suspense. We don't need to see it yet. Keep the audience guessing, draw it out. It's more tension, right? What we're doing is we're in the Undercity, and we're introduced to Vi and Caitlin leading a squad of 4 people, Officer whatever her name is, and Shield guy. We get rid of Fish guy because he's useless. And what we're doing, and we get to watch them pulling an operation just the way we did with the gang pulling the heist at the start of episode 1 in the first season. So we get a chance to know the characters, understand their personalities. We have Vi filling Vi's role. We have Caitlin filling, I'd say, probably Powder's role. And then we have Shield guy being Clagger and Scottish officer girl being Milo, let's say. Not specifically, but we're setting up. It's like poetry; it rhymes. So we're setting up a similar dynamic, right? They don't have to be the same characters, obviously. They shouldn't be, but subconsciously the audience will resonate with this. Oh, we're back here, and we spend the whole episode with them going through and actually executing an operation down there in the Undercity, and the fallout of that. And maybe at this point is where we actually introduce the Gray, so it makes a little more sense, because it kind of did come out of nowhere. Then episode 2 is very strong, but the Black Rose kind of comes out of nowhere as well. And this is one of the reasons I said I'm disappointed and confused was my first impressions, because the Gray, the Black Rose, my first impressions I sent to you was I'm disappointed and confused, right?
Oh, and yes. Okay.
And a big part of the confusion is that they're springing all of this stuff on us all at once. Wild Runes, the Gray, the Black Rose, stuff we had no setup with before, or at least it was so oblique that you can't make an immediate connection. So episode 2.
I think, you know what, and now that, because I've been reading the chat, and Micah mentioned that there were 5 seasons planned.
Holy cow.
And I guess I think what we're seeing is them probably trying to cram in way too much into.
Probably, but you could still do it. There are still ways to do it.
There are. But
so if you were, that's kind of what I'm addressing with this, is like start off, take episode 2, get rid of that scene with Smeech, or change it somehow so we actually have consequences of it. But to start off episode 2, generally don't change anything else, because overall almost everything there was really strong. But give it a cold open as well, and make that a flashback to Chemo's assassination. So we get a background on Ambessa's interaction with the Black Rose and why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, okay, we're doing a flashback. Now we have context for everything that's going to happen. And then we make Ambessa she largely is, but make it even more explicit. She's the driving force of action through this episode. And now we're dealing with the exact effects in in Piltover of the aftermath of the attack of the council chambers, right?
Yeah, I mean, honest to goodness, I don't think there needs to be much rewriting in episode 2 for
No,
how strong it
no,
was, and I don't think you're doing that, but
that's why I say keep it pretty much the same as it was. Just we need a little more information about that raid that Smeech did, if we even include it in there. I don't think we need to, honestly.
Yeah.
And we need, we could cut that and use the time to make the interaction between Jace and Victor actually meaningful.
Yeah, and like, but Victor, man, so.
But the end of episode 2 is just pure art, man. Oh, it's so good.
The end of episode 2 is incredible, and I think the entire, like, okay, so obviously Victor runs parallel to Jesus Christ. So, but it's on its head parallel. So Victor ascends from Zon. He initially ascends from Zon to Piltover, dies, is resurrected, and then he returns back to Zon.
Yeah,
where Christ will have, down up instead of up down.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting inversion, but also, talking about Victor and Jace, even though their dialogue, they were kind of talking past each other. The fact that Victor was just very disappointed at having been resurrected, and now the hex core is tied to his essence because it killed Sky, and he loved her. He was
we need to get into them in detail.
He was too busy to really love her, or too engrossed in his work to really love her, but he did love her. He realized that tragically only after she had died, and now he wanted the hex core destroyed because of that. But now it's been used to resurrect him, it's just their whole conversation about how their paths had diverged. It's just the affection that was keeping them together.
It feels perfunctory.
Well, it does feel perfunctory, but I think that one line of dialogue was
let's get into that more. It is, and especially with the way they put emphasis on it. I do want to touch on that because I thought that was interesting. But let's get into that in a little bit here, because there's still a few things to fix in Act 1, at least as if I was a successful screenwriter. But one of the things that really bugged me was what they did with Heimerdinger. And so that's another alteration you needed to make in episode 2 is stop making Heimerdinger the butt of the joke. He was never a buffoon in season 1. Yes, he was myopic. He was focused. Like Mel said, he only ever sees the past. So that was a character flaw, but he was never silly. He was never clumsy.
No, he was just as tragic as everyone else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in season 2, he's pretending to be a commando going down the ventilation shaft, and Echo's just kind of rolling his eyes at him. He almost spills the beans about the tree and has to be stopped twice by Echo. I mean, it's like he's just kind of messing around with the tools and drops the wrench, and it's like
I actually really did not like how I didn't like the lines of dialogue that Echo was given to address Heimerdinger, because
it's so disrespectful.
Well, not only was that's not the problem that I have. Like, it can make sense within the context of Echo's character.
Well, sure, but I mean,
disrespectful. My issue was that no one talks that way. No one talks that way.
Yeah. There are some significant weaknesses in the writing too, but it also just the way the writing is treating Heimerdinger as a character is disrespectful, and that really weakens the import of what he has to say. Because Heimerdinger's been right the whole time, right? That's the whole point of the tree.
Yeah, that's why he's tragic. He's correct. He can see what's happening, but he's powerless to stop it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you turn him into the butt of the joke, you completely undermine that. That's also, anyway. I would say that going on then to the third episode, we do a cold open again. Let's make the cold open the little kid who ends up tagged on to Jinx. and give us why she's important, because obviously she's supposed to be. And you could you could you could just do the flashback back to when she was being chased and ran into Jinx in the first place. And now because we've had more time, because we changed episode 1, we've had more time to let the other stuff breathe. We can spend more of episode 3 getting a solid depiction of the relationship between Jinx and her, so that it actually means something, when other than Vi looking at her and saying, "Oh, well, big sister, little sister," you know, make it matter more, so that we actually care about the character and it's in her own right, rather than just as an accessory, like you said. So that's how I would fix, quote unquote, Act 1 of Season 2 so far. Granted, they made all of the episodes ahead of time and are the storyline's locked. So things could definitely change going forward. But I think that they should have saved Singed for episode 4. Give us a cold open of him going and finding those wolves and getting the heart and all that kind of stuff, and then
I agree.
Make it Singed on Warwick. They're the ones for episode 4 driving it forward.
Right. Because and that has been the way. So to its credit, now I don't want it to come across like I don't like it. I
very much enjoy it, but there was stuff that stuck in my craw.
Yes, yeah. It's just it's very
well, because season 1 was so strong and so elevated.
Season 1 was so strong. It was very long in development. It had been measured and weighed ad infinitum to really give us a very strong season. Mm-hmm. Season 2 is it had a lot to live up to, right? And then it had a lot to live up to, and they changed writers, and they're sort of changing the style, at least in places, in very ineffective ways. So I don't want it to seem like I don't like it or that I'm being hypercritical. I do quite like it. I'm very excited to see where it goes, especially with Victor, because like I said, episode 2 is the strongest one of this set that we received. But I really think that so we need to see, I think that it was good. Each of these episodes, at the very least, spoke to their themes. It spoke to the theme of family, it spoke to the theme of retribution, and it spoke to the theme of death and grieving, and how people are dealing with the different types of death that they've experienced. So that is a very good thing. They all point directly at their themes when they need to, and so that's good. Singed and Warwick have nothing to do with any of that. And so I think that allowing them to have their own episode and to breathe in that episode would be a far better choice than kind of ham-fisting these vignettes in at the end that don't really speak to the themes. And we could get a focus on them. We could sort of change. Maybe we want to theme it differently for the next 3-act structure in these 3 episodes. But I didn't like how I mean, look, I get what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to generate interest to see where the story's going to go. I just don't think that they necessarily, with these 2 characters, Singed and Warwick, I don't think they really nailed it. I think it should have been done in a different way. And I really do think that an extra, if chop off episode 1, trash it completely, start at episode 2, episode 3, then give us a Singed and Warwick episode, right? And it still will tie into family and death, right? It's just sort of it's an introduction. It's a segue into the next 3-act structure. So I think that probably would have done it a little bit more effectively. Now, I didn't sit down and consider how to rewrite this. So I am just this is really off the cuff here. I'm sure that you can find fault in what I'm saying and what I'm proposing, but just suffice it to say there are a lot of ways, or at least 2 ways, that you could have handled this a little bit better, yours or mine, and I'm sure that there are others.
Yeah, yours is the more straightforward and simple way. But the other thing too is, I don't want to come across like I didn't enjoy it either. I did enjoy it, but I am being hypercritical.
Well, yeah,
So I own that.
Yeah, but and I think that there's an important thing to consider here, and that's that the people who love it the most will likely be the most vocal, right?
Yeah.
I want it to succeed. I want it to be the best that it can be. I do enjoy it quite a bit, but I think that it could have been better, and that's because I want it to succeed. It's because I do like it. It's because I already have, for good or ill, preconceived notions of these characters that I've agreed to throw out because this is canon, but I have that, right? That's still on board. And so I really do not want to seem like I don't like it. I'm being critical because I have a love for it. And I think yours is very, you're coming from very much the same place.
Yeah.
You are being critical because you love it. And so that's, I don't want it to seem like I'm shitting all over it for the sake of shitting on it, or I'm calling it bad. It's not bad. It's just not as good as
it's not as strong as it I could be, and I would say should be, given the past track record. Also what I'm doing too is introducing these new concepts one per episode, instead of we get dumped on with the gray and the black rose in episode 2 all at once. And it's a lot.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
And the wild runes, actually, come to think of it. We get all 3 of those things all at once. So
that was a bit of a struggle for me as well. It's maybe too many rapid fire concepts. Like the black rose,
you know what? It just hit me. The
black rose, I can kind of maybe draw some similarities to some lore stuff that I know in the game. Like, it seems to definitely be of Noxian origin, and it probably has something to do with a character called Swain. There's a character from Noxus called Swain, and he very much has it's this red magic type energy, and hands are involved for sure.
Oh, so he's like the big. Isn't he an actual demon though?
Isn't he a what?
Isn't he an actual demon? I don't know.
Yeah, well, he can transform into a demon, and he's I believe he's currently the leader of Noxus. I don't know if he is in the timeline of the show, and maybe these are events that will lead up to that. But the more I think about it, like, I would have been fine if they just left season 1 as it was, and then gave us a season 2 of Arcane in a completely different area of the world with completely different characters. I still would have watched it. It still would have been great. It still would have been decently written, and I don't need a continuation from the first season. I think that's really what I'm realizing here. Now that again, 3 episodes might change, but that's where I am currently. I think.
I mean, I know.
But to get back to what I was saying, the Black Rose. I didn't mean to interrupt you again there. I apologize.
That's okay.
But like the Black Rose, kind of, sort of seems like it might have something to do with Noxus. I mean, obviously, Ambessa.
I think it's supposed to be like a secret order of Noxian mages.
Right. Like yes, like something like that. Maybe it's an order of assassins, a secret order of mages, maybe mage assassins. I don't know what they are. I've never heard the name before in the lore, but there are some visual tip-offs to what could be involved.
Yeah,
maybe are, but I don't know for sure. As far as wild runes, no clue.
Yeah, no clue. It actually just reminded me of one of the thoughts I had earlier, is actually what they should have done if they wanted to keep the ending of episode 3 the way it was. They should have done a flashback in the cold open of episode 3, going back to a conversation that Jace and Victor had about the wild runes. That way, you split it up so you get the gray in episode 1, then you get the black rose in episode 2, then you get the wild runes in episode 3, and you've set up all of the new continuations of all of these things for the rest of the acts.
Yeah, and like,
that would be a lot stronger.
I think that even having them, like you said, have a flashback where they discuss wild runes would at least allow me as an audience member to go, oh, okay, well, they know what they're seeing.
So
it's okay.
Yeah.
But that's not, we didn't get that. And it would, like, it's obviously,
we got all those things, they just were dumped onto us all in episode 2. For as strong as episode 2 is, that's probably one of the big reasons I felt so confused the first time I watched it through.
Yes, yeah, and Zane even says the same thing. There's a lot introduced at once. Also says the Black Rose is the reason why I think
Yes, for
Ambessa
sure.
is pushing for
100%.
second order. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. I'm sure it is a
No,
plot.
yeah, I picked that up for sure. That's exactly why she's in Noxus or in Piltover.
And so I didn't pick up on that. That's a very astute observation. And I'm okay with not knowing what the Black Rose is. Like, I'm okay with not knowing what wild runes are. But the issue is that I don't know what they are. And while Ambessa does, and Mel does know what the Black Rose is, Jace doesn't appear to know what wild runes are. And he doesn't explain. I mean, he doesn't capably explain it.
Yeah. It just comes out of, again, it's that trend where things happen because they're supposed to. Here, okay, this is one of the phrases that popped in my head yesterday, I think, was that the season 2 is very much plot driven so far. Season 1 was character driven, 100%
yes.
character driven,
absolutely character driven. I agree.
And season 2 is plot driven, and that's a very different style of show. And it's a bit of a whiplash, especially because there was no time jump. If there was a time jump, it would be easier to swallow. But we pick up immediately, like she said, the second after the end of season 1, we pick right back up, and it's like, if you're gonna do, you could have done it if you'd done it the way I put forward, but if you're gonna do that, then you still need to stick to the conventions you've already established for 9 episodes prior.
Yes.
And why would you change if it worked so well? Because it worked really, really well. It was a genius way of telling the story. It's one of the reasons the story is so strong, is that you can recontextualize everything you've watched up to that point within a few minutes
like
of one
show
episode.
us what they know, then show us how they're reacting in the present to what's happening to them.
Exactly.
I think that it is, and
I
actually complain heavily about flashbacks or flashes sideways or flashes forward. I complain heavily about those. I typically will say that it's bad writing, but in the case of Arcane season 1, it's used as such an effective tool because
it's like a framing device.
It's a framing device. It's used to drive characters in a character-driven season, so it is very effectively used. Nothing goes to waste. It is not simply for the sake of giving the audience information, because that's usually what flashbacks are used to do, and it's a very, very lazy way to do it. So because it drives characters, because it allows us to understand what they understand, and because they're then driving the action from there, it becomes very, very effective. I agree. I think that seeing a flashback with maybe how Ambessa's son died, or how he was involved with the Black Rose, or how the Black Rose entered into her life, like that would have been a really great way to establish that episode and then sort of flow through to the end. I also think the same should have been done with Wild Runes, but I don't think in the same episode at all.
No, of course not. No.
At all. Yeah. So Zane says, season 2 feels more Game of Thrones with all the plot-driven actions. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it would have been cool to also too if they'd started episode 2 with a flashback to Kino's assassination. That would have given us. We could have seen what Ambessa meant when she said, "I was distracted."
Yes,
in season 1. So it's just, I don't know. Anyway,
I absolutely love Ambessa's character. She is so, and I'm glad that she's sort of stepping in to a more spotlit role this season. She was very background in the last season. She was prominent, but she was background. It was more how Mel was interacting with her mother and those sorts of things. Now she's very prominent. She's driving the plot forward by selecting Caitlin as the general. Like, she's really very well written, and I think that the season's going to be stronger for her being way out in front.
Oh yeah, for
very,
sure.
very, very happy for that. I think that Caitlin is still well written as long as we stop with the "I am character, I feel this way" dialogue. But I don't think we really got much of that past the first episode. That was really like that. We got a lot of it in the first episode. There was some of it in episode 2 with Victor and Jace, as you mentioned. Pushing past that, there wasn't a whole lot after that point.
there, the conversation that Vi and Caitlin had in the hallway just before they kissed also didn't really land for me. Again, it felt like they were talking about two different things.
I don't know if I got that, but I do. Let me think about this here.
That's also where they cut loose the other characters, the ancillary characters, the ones we don't know anything about, because they knew it would just kind of weaken the story.
Right.
But Vi's justification is really
flimsy,
very flimsy. It's like, okay, what evidence do you have for that? What do you? And other than that, she's just coming up with an excuse to get rid of them.
Hey, good night, Zane. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your participation. Yeah.
And Juden Fuds, thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. I appreciate the participation.
I know it's really, we're like on the other side of the planet, so it's way different time for you.
Yeah. Unless Zane is still here and he was just saying good night to Juden Fuds.
Oh, maybe.
Whatever. Maybe I got it wrong.
Regardless, we're glad everybody.
Yes, we're glad everyone is here for as long as you can be here.
Appreciate your contributions to the conversation too.
Absolutely. Chat has always been great, and I'm very, very appreciative. And then season 3, we get a lot of action, but it's really just it's establishment. It's all the lead up to Caitlin becoming the general as selected by Ambessa, because Caitlin is hardened after she goes down into Zaun. And there's a lot to say about this, right? She goes down with the 3 objectives. We never really see her do anything beyond just search for Jinx. So she's not really looking for Shimmer that we've seen. Yeah. Maybe that's what's the Yordle's name with the robot arms?
Sneech.
Yeah, Sneech. Maybe that's what Sneech saw. Maybe that's what he encountered when he saw the gray and the 3 glowing circles in the gray. Like, maybe that's their thing. We don't know. There's no explanation for that whatsoever. We don't know why they were there.
And there's no consequences either.
Right. And even like the expectation of that possibly being the enforcers, but also possibly being misdirection, is still sort of present. So who knows?
Yeah, because then later on, when they're going in the arcade and Jinx sees the gray coming in there, I mean, they personify it. They give it a mouth, and they give it a face.
Yes.
And so is that just because she's psychotic, or is that because it actually has some kind of a motivating force in the gray itself? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know any of that. But like, it just, episode 3, I think it does need it needs strengthening. It needs punching up for sure.
Yeah, it's just rushed.
Yes, very, very rushed.
Anyway,
and I do
the ending of it. The ending of episode 3 is really cool, with all the time stuff and the going on inside the hex gates and all that.
Yes.
Again, the hex gates going all the way down into the underground should have been set up at the cold open where we were introduced to the wild runes in the first place. So
yes,
because that's another thing that just seems to happen because it was convenient for the plot. I mean, it makes sense because in episode 4 of season 1, we saw Victor looking down into what looked like an endless pit right below them, but it wasn't established why it was built that way, and that could have been another more significant source of conflict. They almost started getting there as Echo was arguing with Jace over, you put it down here, and this is where all of our water, distribution.
Yeah, that's where all our
air distribution. Yeah. So this is why it's affecting the tree in the first place, and yada yada. And you started going. You don't even think about how stuff you do up topside is going to affect us down here, and so on and so forth. And they could have really played that up a little bit too.
Yeah. Zane says he wasn't feeling it, or they. I don't know. I don't know what you are. So I wasn't feeling episode 3 until the end with the Ambessa reveal. I agree with that. I think that
Ambessa reveal
everywhere
was super
Ambessa appears, the show is stronger for it. I
Yeah.
think the plot is stronger for it. I think her characterization is excellent because she is very hateable by the audience, but her motivations are very relatable. So you do not like what she's doing, but you absolutely understand why she's doing it. You still
Just like
don't like.
Silco. Just like Silco. It's one of the
Yes,
reasons that
yes, just
Silco
like
is
Silco. Just like
Silco's
Silco.
actually my favorite. Caitlyn, first season, I guess it's a little bit of a toss up between Silco and Caitlyn as far as my favorite characters go. But Silco, yeah, absolutely outstanding character. And if you can achieve something similar to that with Ambessa, which it looks like they're doing, and I don't expect that they would. Hopefully, they don't change that. She's going to be the Silco of season 2, which is great. I love that kind of character.
Yeah, I think that Silco is very strong. I think that Ambessa is very strong, and it's like it's two different types of strength, right? So Ambessa is very, very confrontation forward,
Mm-hmm.
and Silco is very confrontation averse, but in a way that like he'll just backstab you. He doesn't need to punch you in the face. He's just going to wait a minute and backstab.
Yeah, the types of power they wield are different, but the
Yeah.
ways they go about it, actualizing it, are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Ambessa might be the Silco this season.
Silco this season, yeah.
I agree. She's very, very strong.
Ambessa's going behind everybody's backs, just like Silco would, like all the shadow deals that.
Yeah, and see, that's another thing. Maybe Ambessa is an evolution of Silco, because Ambessa does a very, very powerful confrontational front, but she also has the background stealth manipulation, double dealing sort of element to her.
They both want war, and they both want it for family.
True. So they are similar, but Ambessa just might be like just an evolution of where we left Silco when he died. I'll have to think about that more. I'm not prepared to like flatly state this, but I think that in this conversation, kind of feeling that out, it feels right. But I still need to do a rewatch, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, that's a good point, though. That's a good thought. So
but yeah, I think that of all the characters currently that we have seen in season 2, Ambessa's characterization is the strongest. It's the one that I like the most. I think that she's really kind of wherever she appears, the episode is made better for her. And I think that Victor is likely going to end up being as strong. He's just only getting started.
Right. We only see him in episode 2. So
yeah.
Which, speaking of Victor, when you one of the things that really stood out to me was, and you mentioned this in passing a little bit earlier on, what they did with his voice when he first stepped out of the cocoon. And it was all kind of, it had the little, it had the flange on it, right? And it kind of sounded metallic and hollow, like almost like there were two people speaking at the same time. Really weird. And then his voice kind of goes more towards normal until he gets to the word affection. It says, "Our paths diverged long ago." Affection, and then he has that flange on it, on that one word, and then says, "Affection is what kept us together." I thought that really stood out to me. Obviously, it hasn't been paid off in any way,
right? Not yet.
But I think it may have something to do too with. I don't think it's hallucination. I don't think it's necessarily the hex core itself manipulating him. I think Sky is actually in the hex core.
I think there is definitely something.
It ashed. It turned her into ash, but that was so sudden that what if her essence is actually in there?
I think that the hex core, at least in the information we've got. Oh, hey, PH, thanks for showing up.
Hey,
got home. It's already midnight, so sleepy. Well, you can go to sleep. But I appreciate you showing up to say hi.
Yeah.
But you can go to sleep, like he needs my permission. I think that what were we on? Victor.
Yeah, Victor and Sky.
Oh, so insofar as the information we've been given and what I know from the game, I would not be surprised to learn that the reason the Hex Core absorbed Sky is because it's actually attempting to mirror Victor's own emotional state. Because the Hex Core is sort of, and it's emotionally tied to Victor as well as now physically.
Yeah.
So, and I think that it was because it was feeding off of his desires. It was feeding off his wishes. You don't want to limp anymore? Here, I'll give you this new leg. You don't want to be sick anymore? Here, I'll give you this new body. You love this woman? Well, now I do too, and I'm going to express it in a really strange.
Now she'll always be with you.
Right. So I agree. I don't think that Sky, or at least in this moment, I don't have any reason to think that Sky is a hallucination. I think that is genuinely a consciousness that Victor can see and interact with.
Yeah, I would agree.
In fact, we only saw Victor's face while he was in the cocoon, showing what's left of his humanity. Yes, because he is now almost entirely unhuman or inhuman. And Victor's whole shtick in the game is, it's this hybrid of Hex Core tech and humanity. He calls it the glorious evolution. That's one of his lines in the game is "Join the glorious evolution," which is why I hashtagged it in the description. So he is eventually, I believe, he'll transition from wanting to save people or seeming to want to save people to actually wanting to convert them physically by force, because that's who he ends up being in the game. We'll see. Just because that is the canon that I am familiar with doesn't mean it won't be rewritten here. I am 100% open to it being rewritten.
But I hope they do go that
character. He's very satisfying to play, very unique play style. I really do like Victor.
I hope they do go that way, though, because if he's just Mecha Jesus, then that's kind of
Mecha Jesus is boring.
We've seen that so many times.
Yes, Mecha Jesus is very boring. So I hope that there is. I hope that this season is as tragic as the last one, if not more, because that's the kind of story that I did. I like bleakness. I feel like as an audience member, there is truth there. And I think that speaking that truth as something that people don't often want to hear is important, which is why I like those types of stories. I don't want it to be bleak just for the sense of making someone miserable or depressing me. I want there to be a truth there. And I think that there is a lot of truth represented in Arcane. I think Arcane speaks to the truth quite a bit.
Is it like the truth? Is it something like sometimes things don't always work out the way you want them to, or something like that? What kind of truth would you say that speaks to specifically?
What, Victor?
No, the having a bleak, like a tragic story or a story that's.
Hey, Nerdy Ogre! Thanks for showing up.
Hey,
I think that there, generally speaking, is truth. I don't think it's a specific truth, but I think that when you consider humanity, the truths of being human, be they with human relationships or the passage of time and how it sort of ravages us as humans, how we are cursed to be passed by time because we are temporal creatures. There's a lot there that people generally, and at least in my experience, and maybe this isn't the world over, but generally speaking, I would think that there's truths there that are just, people don't want to talk about them. They're an elephant in the room. We all know that they're there. We just don't want to face it. We don't want to discuss it because it can be difficult. It can put you in a bad sort of frame of mind. And that's why I like the stories, because they are discussing things that we tend to avoid discussing. And there, as I previously said, there's a truth there. We're examining a truth regarding humanity. That's why I like cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk, generally speaking, very, very bleak. And there is truth to cyberpunk, right? I've said before on this channel in Discord, I think that we are living in a cyberpunk dystopia. And, whether or not Whether or not cyberpunk as a genre spoke that truth to power, or whether or not it was just really the recognition of what will eventually happen if we continue down certain paths.
It's we're in the cyberpunk future without so much of the cool stuff.
Yes, cyberpunk future without the cool stuff. A lot less neon, and also there are a lot more insidious ways.
It's a lot more cyber and a lot less punk.
Yes, yeah, and they're like the people who wrote cyberpunk in the 70s and 80s they were not expecting humanity to be exploited in the way in which we're currently being exploited with regard to data maintenance and
Right.
us being a product, et cetera, et cetera. So like there was truth to it, but they didn't go far enough, which is another sort of bleak truth.
Well, they were more the genre has always been a little more physically focused and less informationally focused. But information is where the real currency comes from today. So that kind of dictates the separation between the conventions of the genre as it viewed the future to the way the future actually unfolded.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's a whole other stream.
It is a whole other stream. Zane says speaking of Victor, he'll probably form the Church of Victor and see how weak people are around him and they're suffering and want to evolve them. However they do it, I'm excited for wherever Victor goes. I hope that reality matches my expectation. I have very high hopes for that character. I have very high hopes for that character, and I really hope they're able to deliver on that. Nerdy Ogre, it's Arcane Season 2, so we're discussing Season 2. It's heavy spoilers, so if you haven't seen it and want to see it spoiler-free, there's your warning. Probably a little late. Micah says, Kathy Nightingale, what's good about sad? Sally Sparrow says, it's happy for deep people.
That's quoting Blink right there.
I don't know how deep I am. I just I don't know. There's something about a bleak story that I can appreciate.
That's Blink. The episode that's from is arguably the best episode you could introduce somebody to Doctor Who with, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's Blink. It's the one where they created the Weeping Angels.
Oh, yes. I am familiar with that. Candace and I used to watch Doctor Who religiously. I didn't like Matt Smith, so we fell off about a third of the way through that season. I think that he is excellent in other roles. It's not that I don't like him. It's that I just didn't like him in that role. And so once we stopped watching, it became this sort of Herculean effort to go back again and watch the season. And I'm just not in it. So it's maybe it will happen. Maybe it won't. But of the new Doctors, I really like Eccleston. And of the old Doctors, I really like Tom Baker. And I really like, dang it, what's the guy's name? He played Radagast.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. Well, anyway, we used to like Doctor Who quite a bit, but I fell off during the Matt Smith era. Zane says, yeah, you can relate the problems of Hex Tech and the Arcane to the environmental problems caused by technology in real life. That's true. That's very true. And then on ramp to Doctor Who. Yeah, it is. I think Blink is a really solid episode. I think that, well, this isn't a Doctor Who discussion, so we can talk about that. But I agree. It's a very good onboarding episode. It's full of intrigue. It's very, it's got those kind of horror hooks, right? Where like it's an intense watch, and so you want to see more. So I think it is very good onboarding episode. But
also, it gave us the wibbly wobbly tiny wimey stuff.
It did, unfortunately. I actually don't like that phrase. It's annoying as hell. But I'm not gonna. Yeah, I mean, look, if it's your thing, it's your thing. I think now is actually a pretty. Here Micah says, I loved Eccleston as well, as he gets overlooked a lot. I like Tennant more, but a large part of that is more time and a lot more quality written episodes. So I love the Davies era of Doctor Who. I think that he was an excellent showrunner for both Eccleston and Tennant. I really do love Tennant, but there's something about Eccleston's Doctor, and probably is an analog or at least draws a parallel to my love of bleakness. Eccleston is a very dour doctor. He's a very serious, very just like
Intense.
I said, dour. He's a very like bitter realist kind of a doctor, and I like that about the way he portrays the character. So I do like Eccleston. Tennant's great as well, though. Matt Smith wasn't my cup of tea. And then Nerdy Ogre says, I have no idea what that is. I can infer that it's a TV show, but other than that, yeah, it's a British TV show. It's one of the longest running sci-fi shows. I think ever, maybe the longest running. But it is a British sci-fi show that revolves around a character called the Doctor, and it's very British, but it's also very good.
Kind of high concept sci-fi.
Yeah, very high concept.
High concept space.
Very high concept.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he's talking about Arcane too. If you haven't seen Arcane, go on Netflix and watch the first season of Arcane. It is an animated show that was inspired by the League of Legends video game. It is an outstanding, exceptional, as Bacon says, animated series.
All right. Oh, yeah. Doctor Who is what I just explained.
Yeah,
so
okay.
A little bit of confusion in the chat over what you were asking, but I think you got it both ways. So there you go. Now you know.
I'm very interested for the rest of season 2 of Arcane, just because we now have so many disparate threads going in so many different directions. I have no idea how they're going to tie them all together.
Completely agree. I am very excited to see next week's episodes. I'm very excited to discuss them. I'm excited to refine my views from this episode moving forward, because because it's incomplete, and I mentioned this at the top of the stream, because it's incomplete, there's a lot that's still malleable, right? There's a lot of information we don't have. There's a lot that we might not understand, and it's much different than having everything all at once in a film. You can look and see how the story unfolded across whatever its runtime is and understand things from start to finish. We don't yet have that. And so as the show progresses and evolves, it may shed light on, or I would expect it to shed light on, some of the things that we don't currently have information for in this moment. And it may end up changing our minds for the better or for the worse, but I would expect it change for the better. At least that's what I would expect.
I'm hoping for a change in the better. I admit I'm a little more apprehensive now, having seen and heard some of the fairly poor writing in the first 3 episodes on the dialogue front.
I am character. This is how I feel.
That sets my teeth on edge.
Yeah, me too. And it's like, show me how you feel. Don't tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
It's like film 101, show, don't tell.
And in dialogue, that's part of the art of writing good dialogue, is having the characters talk about one thing and mean another.
Yes, the subtext for sure. I agree.
And especially in a show like this, where they have such high quality animation, they spend so much time on the subtleties of the characters' expressions and movements, which you don't get in typical animation. You can lean on that even more so, and not have to, and allow that to carry the subtext of dialogue that is ostensibly saying something that might even be completely opposite with what the character's actually feeling. But you'd be able to infer their emotions by their actions rather than their words. So lean on that too. Take advantage of this unique and superlative expression of this medium that you're using. Yes. Because no other studio does it.
In fact, I read something earlier. There was an interview with the showrunners, and they were asked about the budget. Like, how do you feel about, I think it was $250 million season? And their response, or part of the reply was, well, that's kind of the point. We wanted to see what a high budget animation would actually look like.
Yeah.
And so
it's not a feature film, an actual series. Yeah.
It looks incredible.
Yeah. It surely does.
Yeah. Yeah, and Zane again says, I love the season 1 where they showed the duality but didn't say it out loud or spell it out to you.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Yeah. That's really where it should sit, right? That's where good dialogue and good exposition sit.
I mean, some of the
Mm-hmm.
some of the stuff, like there's some, especially in episode 9 of season 1, stuff like, "Is there anything so undoing as a daughter?" Or
And it's
we lost
every
ourselves.
daughter in the season, every
Right,
daughter,
right.
Mel and Vi and Jinx, and every single one. There was one of the
Even Marcus's
police
daughter.
officers from Piltover. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's got a
Marcus's
young
daughter was
daughter.
his undoing.
Yes, it's like every single daughter in the season, in the series.
And then we
Very,
lost it.
very, very important piece of dialogue, and it means so much more to what we've seen of the world as opposed to just the conversation they're having in front of them, which is exactly the point you're speaking to. It's the subtext.
Yeah, it's working on multiple. It is Silco's own epiphany. It's referring to one of the major thematic through lines. It's just brilliant dialogue.
Yes, absolutely brilliant.
And Victor as well. We lost ourselves, lost our dream. In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good. Is a devastating line. Absolute poetry. I mean, there's just a lot that the writers did.
And that kind of speaks to what happened with Jason Victor, right? Like it was an expression of a type of greed to want to bring Victor back from the dead.
Yeah.
So in his greed, he failed to do good, which would have been what Victor wanted: destroy the hex core.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's reverberating forward as well as backward, which speaks to the excellence with which the first season was cut. It was just incredible. If you haven't seen it and you're out there in chat or you're watching this after the fact, highly recommend Arcane. I'm very, very interested in what happens in the second season. I am very willing to give them what time that they need to get to where they're going, and I'm very happy to refine my opinions. I know that this episode has been hopefully not overly critical, but it has been very critical of the things that we've seen in the first 3 episodes of season 2.
One last thing I wanted to touch on, and I think is the outstanding part of this act, first act. And Zane's, for whatever reason, Zane's most recent comment triggered that I hadn't triggered the thought that we hadn't talked about.
On the statue?
Yeah. What the best conversation in the show so far for season 2 has been in Silco's office with Savika and Jinx talking about
for sure. Yes.
And they're both talking about how helpless he was without them, and how he couldn't do anything, and that he was completely lost and all this kind of stuff, when what's really going on is that they are completely helpless and lost without him.
Yes.
And they're both bonding over the fact that they just don't have any idea what to do now because he's missing.
Which means Jinx has effectively replaced Vi. She now has a new older sister. And she's also an older sister herself. So like there are whiffs of really, really excellent characterization and writing. It's there. It's very subtle, which is fine because the entire first season thrived on its subtlety. It's just that there are some bits of overtness that are kind of undermining that in the moment that we don't have the rest of the series. So we'll see where it goes. I think right here is really an excellent place to end on that point. So guys, thank you for showing up and for hanging out. Sable, as always, thank you. I feel like this has been one of the best media review streams that we've done, or media discussions. So
cool.
I'm super jazzed about it. Wednesday, it's going to be you and I with Lou, right?
Yeah, right.
I need to get the waiting room up for that. I need to send it over to Lou. That should be a really great conversation. So typically, this is a role-playing / film channel, media channel. So if you guys want to show up for that, awesome. If not, no big deal. So thank you all for showing up. Thank you for the interaction. Sable, any parting words?
No, not really, other than regardless of the weaknesses we've highlighted, I was still enjoying every single second watching it just because the quality level of Arcane is unmatched.
Yes. I agree. So just because we're critical, it doesn't mean we don't like it. In fact, it's born out of a love.
Absolutely.
So I don't think that we don't think that we are being overly critical or that we don't like it, that we're trying to trash it. That's not it at all. So I'm really excited for next week's conversation on the next 3 episodes. I am probably going to try to get the first season watched before that, so I can, refresh my memory, because it's a while ago and there are bits that they're referring to that I just haven't remembered. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Sable. I'm going to click end stream. You're going to watch my dumb face for a couple more seconds, but we'll see you all Wednesday, and then after that again on Sunday for the follow-up for the next 3 episodes. So thank you all, and have a good night. Good night.
Good night, everyone.